So in the third stage of my data analysis, I was taking all that I knew about the emerging themes. And I appreciate the emerging themes have the same names as the sensitizing concepts in a lot of examples, which I personally found really confusing. Hopefully you don't. What's happened is when they are sensitizing concepts, I've got like a scant understanding of what they are, but they are effectively like the magnifying glass that I'm looking through as I inspect the data. And then within the data is what I find when I look through that glass. And I'm also calling what I find by the same term. But what I find is a much more detailed, much richer, much more solid thing than just the, oh, I think it's something to do with this. I'm going to have a look and see if there's anything to do with this. So I took the summary information on all the emerging themes that I had, so things like intention, obstruction, and put it into, this time it's a 3-column table. It's gone advanced. I loved my 2-column tables for phase 2 data analysis, but phase 3 data analysis, I did a 3-column table, and I put into it what I knew about each of those themes from each of the phases of my data. So I had 3 phases of data collection: phase 1, 2, 3, stage 1, 2, 3. I forget whether it's a stage or a phase, but you know, it was at the start and it was in the middle and it was at the end. And it's a similar process to before, in that I was trying to line up within these tables things that were similar to each other. Some of the things occur across all the stages, some of them are just occurring across the cut. So for example, quite often in the first bit of being in the field, I was commenting on how people's pain was an obstruction to us working together. And by the time I'm in the later stages of the research, I'm not commenting on it as much. And that's not because the people that I was working with were any less in pain. It's just I've become accustomed to people being in pain and it's been normalized, and so it's less remarked upon in my field notes. So when you could see things like that, things appearing or disappearing, that gave you like that understanding of, oh yeah, I've got used to that. That's just become every day to me now. That's an understanding that I got through seeing that those mentions of pain are there a lot at the start and then they drop off. And so as I created that table, I'm also discovering, creating that kind of understanding of the data through time. And the manipulation of that table, in the same way that I was shifting things around in the other tables, I played with this table in all sorts of ways. I highlighted the boxes, I wrote in different colours. But in essence, everything that I'm doing is a way of bringing myself into an engagement with the data, immersing myself in it, really thinking about it in different ways and from different directions. And I'm always checking back to the original field notes, you know, the original stuff. Basically just getting my hands dirty in the data and moving it around and finding, you know, what understanding can be had from that. And as a result of that, I had 3 themes. Well, I had 4 themes, but I had 3 themes that I was very clear about, and they were being with, intention, and obstruction. And the 4th theme was my being autistic, but I left that out of the data analysis from this point onwards because it didn't answer the original question of the research. So it's relevant and it's something that I pick up in postdoc studies. But at this point, I left it out. And then I tried to describe each of those themes, so what I know about those themes now. And I've got so much more, you know, at the start, I'm going, I think intention is significant. And now I can go, here's intention. This is the way in which I experience it in the field. Here's here's the things that come out from that tree. Here's what I know about intention. So I'm writing like a summary document of intention, and then a summary document on being with, and a summary document on obstruction. And then in phase 4 of my data analysis, I called it writing into the data. I was trying to write about the stuff that I knew or the stuff that was emerging, or the stuff that seemed relevant and important. And so I was going back in and writing about those things. And it's obviously, I've already written those summaries, so it's not that I'm particularly trying to get an overview of it. It was just the process of writing. It's a way of bringing embodied engagement into it. It's a way of feeling through the data, because I was writing about things, and then you try and write a description of it, and then you think, well, that's not conveying what it was. So one of the really great examples here is restrictive practice, people being put into bits of equipment that restrain them, or being physically restrained, was one of the obstructions. So was the classroom being really noisy. And I could write, when the classroom was really noisy, it was difficult for me to concentrate, it was difficult for them to focus, and it was distracting. This was an obstruction to the work. But when I was writing, they were strapped into a chair, and this was an obstruction to the work. It didn't feel on the same level, and I could feel, as I tried to write those descriptions, the inadequacy of those descriptions, which told me that there was more to understand there, and there was something else going on that I haven't got my finger on yet. There's something more. So it was a way of directing myself into the data, and I kept doing that until I reached a saturation point, until I wasn't getting any further with it. And then for phase 5, I went back and I looked at all of the photos. Now, the photos were not my data. They were created in order to enhance the impact of the work. But because, and I wouldn't expect anybody else to be able to use them as data, because what you would see is a picture of me and a picture of a young person, and what I see, and that's what I see. But what happens when I look at it is they remind me, they take me back to a place that I actually was, to feelings that I actually had. And it's that experience rather than the image that is informative. And so I went back and I looked through all the photos, and it was really interesting how much they made particular themes sing, or how much they enhanced the resonance of certain things. And so then once I'd done that, I was able to write into the data again and get more of that engagement and more of that understanding through writing into the data again. And at the end of all of that, I created a document on each of the themes. So I had a document that was, this is what I know about being with, this is what I know about intention, and this is what I know about obstructions to being with. And when I had a document about identity, I haven't mentioned that theme. Obviously, I was studying identity and belonging, so identity was always there. Then I created a bullet point version of each of those documents. And then I printed out all the bullet points, I snipped them up, and I spent days just moving them around. And again, it's a different way of bringing myself into engagement with the data. It's a different way of feeling for an understanding. It's looking at things from different angles. So I was seeing if I could group bullet points according to, which bullet points would go in a group with which other bullet points. If you were going to sequence these bullet points, which bullet points would come first and which bullet points would come later, and asking myself those questions and moving the bullet points around was another way of deepening my understanding of the data. And through that process, I recognised that intention and obstruction were sub-themes of being with. Intention is to do with how you get to a state of being with, and obstruction is something that stops you from being with. Whereas identity remained a standalone theme, and the question about belonging, which is one that I was asking all along, is captured in the being with. The being with is my PhD is in identity and belonging, and the identity is the identity bit, and the being with is the belonging bit. And so I had my findings then. I had an understanding of intention, being with, obstruction, and identity in this context. And I'll tell you about my findings in the next film. But I won't make that one. I'll have to put on a different outfit because I've got to go and get the children from school now.